Hey guys, this is ISE 327. Last two videos, hopefully we get them done today. This video is about chapter 14, which is project roles, responsibilities, and authority. So, basically what we're going to talk about today is with the project manager, the competencies of the project manager, what those are, and the project manager's authority and sources of influence are really two of the big things that you need to worry about as a project manager. So, technical competency. Basically, that's the first thing a project manager should have. They've got to have the experience, the background, and the perspective that spans the entire project. So they need domain competency, right? So you usually pick a project manager who is somehow related in the field and knows enough about all the different aspects of it to be a pretty good project manager, and that's the key, right? These guys usually don't have the technical depth, within a certain domain because that's not needed. They need to know a little bit about everything. So that's why I told you before that usually the best project managers are system engineers, because that's kind of what a system engineer has to do as well. They have to know a little bit about all of them and know who to go find to make sure everything's right? Because if you think about it, the chief engineer really worries about the technical aspects of all the project, and they get into the nitty-gritty details, and then they still go get domain specialists when they need them. But you need somebody who can look at things across the entire process or the entire scope to make sure everything's right? So if you look down here on the slide, on slide 3, the project kind of has equipment, it's got software, you can even go to lean production, training, they've got to be able to understand all those aspects of it. At most major organizations, to become a project manager, you have to be certified as a project manager, which means you go usually through training classes to get you ready to understand all the different aspects of what you're going to do, right? But the technical, usually you don't start out like you guys when you leave college here, aren't going to go out and become a project manager. That's 10, 15 years down the road once you've attained the experience that you need. The only exception to that is IPT. Next year in 428, we will have project managers, but they really don't have all this yet, and so that's kind of the downfall, if there's any, of IPT, is that there aren't, the competency isn't there as much, but the people aspect is really what happens, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. So the project manager basically must be able to understand all phases and aspects of the project. If the project is very long in duration, you might have different project managers come in at different phases because they are better at that phase, Like I, for instance, am really good at phase AB, pre-phase A, phase A at NASA. The upfront stuff, I really like that. Once it gets on down to production and operations, I'm bored to death. And so you can even have that. They have to be able to understand the problems and the issues that arise throughout the project and be able to at least delegate what needs to happen, right? They have to be able to communicate effectively with everyone. Written and oral communication is a big deal for a project manager. The day and age, to us in engineering, we email each other all the time. And so you've got to be able to effectively do that if you're a project manager. They must maintain an unbiased outlook in the interest of the project's goals, right? So they're in charge of making sure everything is right on target, that the project is doing what it's supposed to do and its goals are being met. And they make informed decisions about everything within the project scope, right? This is the big key, the informed decision. They make the decision, but they have to have the information to be able to make it. And that's where the engineers and the technicians and everyone supporting the project team, gives the information to the project manager so he or she can make the decision. And that's the big key for that. Why are you looking at me like that, Matt? Oh, are you learning something here? So the PM is not necessarily the expert in any particular area of the project. Others are better, right? That's the way life goes. Because if a project manager, especially if you have a really technical project manager, they usually end up messing up so bad on the people side of it and managing side of it that it's disaster. So they usually they're not the expert. Almost always, unless it's a very technical, almost technology task. Then you could have a really technical expert as a PM. But for the overall project, the PM is the expert. The PM should know everything about the project. That shouldn't be anybody else's problem, really, if you think about it. Because in project management, there's performance, there's cost, there's schedule, and now there's risk. Usually there's 4 now. And everybody else is usually worried about performance, who is our engineers. Like the chief engineer, that's all they're caring about is the performance. And the engineers are doing that. Schedule is a scheduler with the project manager, right? The cost is budgeting people, which is also with the project manager. And risk is the risk manager and the risk engineer. And so the project manager has to worry about all 4 of those, where everybody else only worries about 1 of them, okay? So basically they're the expert of the whole project. They know how that project is working. They might have to go get someone to tell them a lot about the risk, which is the risk manager or the risk engineer, but they can do it, and that's the point. The chief engineer doesn't do that, it's the project manager. So that's the big thing with that one. An authority, this is kind of the catch-22 of project management. The project manager typically has little to no legal authority, okay? The team is temporary. The project manager basically exists outside the traditional hierarchy. Remember that matrix organization, the PM sets out here and then the matrix feeds it, so they don't really have the power to do anything. And they borrow resources, they borrow people, right? They borrow people from disciplines and have them work on their project. So project authority, basically the PM makes decisions about the project's targets, expenditures, schedules, etc., but cannot give people orders, right? They can't directly do it. So that's the big thing behind this, is they have all the money, and because they worry about all the stuff with the project, but they don't officially task people to do things, you know? That officially comes from the discipline or the functional managers is really where that comes from. Usually, this isn't a big deal, I mean, because functional managers go, just listen to whatever the project manager says. But if it ever came down to an issue, the project manager really can't push it that much. It's the functional manager who has to come in and save the day. So, authority versus responsibility. Basically, responsibility for the project is extremely high, right? They have the ultimate, as Truman says, the buck stops here. They're the one who has to worry about the project meeting all of its goals. The problem is, they have a very low authority to give orders, right? So it's this wild thing that's happening. So being a project manager, you know, everyone thinks, oh, they're the chief, they're the leader, that's the greatest thing in the world. Not really, because there's a delta between them that's not fun, right? And so the difference between that is basically the authority gap. And how you wield your power is how great of a project manager you can be. Because in reality, you don't have a great deal of authority, not the blessing, right? But how you use your personality and your skills, your interpersonal skills, is really what's going to make it work for you. Okay? So there's different sources of influence that these guys have, right? So there's competence, so they're in charge, they know it all, you know, that kind of thing. The big one for me is reputation, okay? That is a huge source of influence. If you walk in and people know you're a really great project manager and you know a lot about what you're doing, that really helps you. Charisma, not bad either. I mean, if you can be charismatic and get this thing to work. I've seen some really great people who can do that suck as technical, right? But they got really great charisma and they know how to get people to understand what they want and do stuff for them. Yeah. Interpersonal skills, same thing. Can you talk to people? Usually, project managers and system engineers are the more extroverted people, right? They're the ones who want to talk to people, get to know them on a personal level. And that's truly when things start working, in my opinion, is that when you start knowing each other on a personal level, you begin to understand, you become almost like a family unit. And that's when it really works. The project manager can get people to do stuff really quickly with him. Leadership, you know, it's all about, do you stay late with them? You know, if you're the guy, if you're the project manager and you, 5 o'clock, I'm out of here, no matter what, they're not going to be thrilled with you, you know? If you're the one willing to stay late, work hard with them, make sure the project team has everything they need, that's the kind of thing they're looking for. The leaders by actions will do a lot more than words, right? Any alliances, you know, are you already aligned with some people? Do you have alliances with others? That's a big deal. And even reciprocity, right? So if you have, you know, I give you this, you give me that, that kind of thing, all that. And look at all the different people they have to worry about when they're doing this. Upper management, functional managers, customers, users, the external stakeholders, the internal team members and suppliers. All of this has to work with that project manager, you know? So again, not a fun job. It's not a fun job at all. This guy or girl has to be really into this, And to me, the project manager is the people person, I call them the cheerleader. They don't have real pom-poms. But, the cheerleader, they're the ones that keep everything going, keep it on track, and they have all that. They have that kind of skill set that is unique in engineering, Engineering doesn't do that. We had a guy here at UAH in ISE. He actually did his dissertation on CEOs of aerospace companies because he wanted to figure out what personality traits did they have versus the standard set of engineers. And we found out hardly none. Okay? And so that's the big thing is engineers as a general rule are not really great project managers because they can't handle the personalities part of it. They can't handle that part of it. So it takes a unique one. You guys in ISE are probably the closest there is in engineering because you people have personalities, You laugh, you talk, ha-ha, You do that kind of stuff. You're not the geek in MAE just sitting down and doing that kind of stuff. You're not the Sparky blowing up crap, in chemical, I don't know what they do. And civil, building bridges, who cares, So you guys are the closest because you're really close. If you look at it, ISE is really close to business. It's probably the business engineering from that perspective. And business people, MBA people, right? They're the ones with the charisma and the whole thing. And that's what the CEOs are usually. And so you are the closest to it. So always remember that, right? It's not all about competency. It's not all about being the smartest person on the team. It's knowing where to get the smartest people to get them together, right? Be George Bush, right? That boy was not the brightest boy in the world, but he could get the brightest people with him to make it work. And that's how he was a successful leader, So think about that. So different skills, right? Behavioral skills. They have to be an active listener. They have to have strong interpersonal and team building skills. They readily give credit and praise to others, right? If you don't do that, you're not going to last as a project manager, right? So remember all that. Don't argue with people. Don't do all that. Be an active listener, right? Team building skills. Create the common enemy outside of the team. That always works, That kind of thing. So all that. They have to have business and communication skills. They got to understand business principles. Finance, accounting, marketing, HR, contracting, purchasing, how the particular business or industry works. Yeah, They have to know how to do that. They have to go work with these people because this is a support team, right? You've got the project team and you've got the support team. And that's all those people. Accounting can drive you nuts. But you can do that. And that's actually if you are interested in this field, your master's and PhD could be in engineering management, which we have here in ISE. The EM of ISE is engineering management, right? And that's what you take. I took, because my PhD is officially in engineering management, I took accounting. So I could figure out how to read what's that called?
Balance sheet?
Balance sheet, yeah. Balance sheet and the flows and all that junk, right? I did that. You could take a finance class. You can learn about HR and then all that kind of stuff. And you can even take business classes in your EM program. And so that's what that's about. So you got to get used to that. And this is the other thing. They have to have good writing and speaking skills, right? Writing, not so much. I mean, you can write some emails on once in a while. You can write some little memos, but you can have people finesse that. Speaking, that's the big boy, right? You've got to be able to talk to people in a room, a gathering of people. And if it's a major program like SLS, you got to be able to talk to the nation. You got to be able to do all that. So you've got to get over that fear of speaking. That is why I'm actually making you present every time to me on your group project, is because speaking skills are unbelievably important, right? I am not sitting here going, good writing and speaking skills, personal features, flexible, confident. I'm not doing that because it drives people nuts, and they're not idiots. They could read. And so I look back and look at it. And so that's what you've got to learn how to be able to do. Be confident in what you're doing. That's a huge part of speaking, is being confident in doing it, right? I've seen some really great speakers over the years, and they actually, some of them don't have the technical competence or anything behind them. It's the fact that they're confident in speaking about it. And so you're like, that's cool stuff, that's what you want to do. So personal features, right? Flexible. They need to be able to do things differently. If you can't accept change, project management is probably not for you. There's the big one. Confident. They have to walk in being very confident to know what they're doing. Persuasive. That's the big boy, right? Be able to get people to do things because you actually don't have much authority. So you got to be able to be persuasive about it and figure it out. Decisive, they must make decisions, you know. I have seen project managers before that will not be decisive, and they really, really, really frustrate me because I don't know what to do, you know. And so I'm sitting there waiting and going, but you got to choose because I don't know where to go, you know. And so being decisive is a big deal. And I'm a big proponent of make a decision, even if we have to go back and change it later on, at least we made a decision, you know. And so make a decision and go forward and go, you know, try it out. And we might come back and go, that's a stupid thing we did, you know. Let's go do something different. They have to have a generalist outlook, so they're looking very broad at the whole system, right? That's why system engineers are really good at this. They have to be organized. That's my probably downfall, if I had one about this. I'm not that most organized of a person, but I can do it. And discipline. They've got to be the ones that's in there, you know, making sure it all gets done, because at the end of the day, it's the buck stops with them, right? And they got to be willing to work very long hours, right? You don't take a project management job just to go, yes, I have a job, bye, you know? These are the guys who stay night and day, burn the midnight oil, get everything done, because the buck stops with them. It must happen, you know? And that's how you build loyalty and people to stay with you, is by that one thing. The core project team basically works on the project. They report to the project manager from a project standpoint, right? They report to their functional manager for all the real stuff, the HR, the timesheets, all that kind of stuff. Usually goes to the functional manager. And it includes contractors and subcontractors. So the core team can be small, 2 people, 3 people, can be large, 10,000, 20,000 people, you know? So that's the kind of thing you have to worry about with the project team. The role of, in the project team, basically, these are the different roles they can have. Project engineer, system engineer, contract administrator, right? All the way down through there. So they can have all the different categories in the world and you know, what their roles and responsibilities are, and all that stuff has to be laid out. So those are kind of the members of the project team. There's also functional managers, right? We talked about these. They often retain the same authority and responsibility as in the non-project environment. So they're the ones that worry about all that other stuff, you know, from the training and the HR and all that, giving pay raises, all that's the functional manager, not the project manager's job. The functional leader is basically a liaison between the project manager and the functional manager. We used to call them lab leads, because we had different labs at Marshall. I was in Cell Lab, Systems Analysis and Integration Lab, and actually my mentor when I worked there, he was the Cell Lab lead for the project. So he was the one who went between the project manager and the functional managers to make sure everything was negotiated correctly and working out. And then they could have work package supervisors who basically report to the functional leader, right? And so you can have all these different people involved. These guys, unless this functional leader could be on the project team, but these guys usually don't have a direct link to the project team. They're supporting the project team in some fashion. Outside the project team, there's managers of projects or the project management office director, right? And they worry about all the different projects that are under them. They worry about all the project managers. They ensure projects are consistent within the organization. The objectives and resources are good. They allocate resources and resolve priority conflicts and assist with basically the policies of the project manager. So this is kind of the project manager of project managers, you know. He could even be the program manager if he had several projects under him, right? And so we had that, and we still have that at Marshall today. We have a program office or a project office over all the projects. And so that's the person who worries about all of it. They're usually called top management, you know. And so a project manager, this is really the project manager's functional manager. And so he or she worries about every project underneath them, right? So the project managers can talk about things and understand what to do. There's also project supporters and other stakeholders as well, right? And so you can see on slide 14 just the different areas that are out there that has to worry about, right? So supporters basically provide support. It's kind of obvious. Sponsorship or cooperation, right? They're the ones who are supporting the project, who say, this is probably a pretty good idea, let's go do it, you know? They can be inside or outside the project's organization, right? The project outside of that organization. They could be inside it saying, yay, 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 or on the outside. I also call them the advocate, you know. They enable project survival because the sponsor basically provides the financial, organizational, or political backing to make it happen, right? So they're the ones saying, fund this, here's the money, let's do it. The champion, on the other hand, rallies support for the project, technology, or end item. So that's the advocate, in my opinion. And they can be the same person, but you can't have a champion who then gets a project sponsor to then give the money. And so that can happen too. In science, that's what we would say. The scientist is a champion at NASA. He then convinced the project office to give the money over to the project to have it happen. It includes agencies and organizations that grant permits, license, and other forms of permission. All these people can be it. It can be anybody on earth can be a supporter, right? And usually advocacy is a way to keep a project alive. Basically, there's other stakeholders, right? And the stakeholder is basically anyone who's influential in, interested in, or affected by the project, right? It's anyone who provides technical expertise, labor, or material, provides sponsorship and support, wants, needs, or supports the project, or opposes or tries to obstruct the project. Basically, all these people are also stakeholders. You usually don't want that one at the bottom because that's the one that's going to try to kill it, right? But they're still stakeholders because they're still sitting there going, no, no, no. Because usually what's probably happening is your project's in conflict with the one they want to support, they want to have happen. So usually you go understand what the issue is with this guy and see if you can work out a deal, right? But remember, stakeholders can be anybody. Members of Congress, especially for us here in Huntsville, Congress is a big deal, right? We even have like the Huntsville community, the mayor, all those people get involved in federal R&D projects that we have here because they want to make sure we keep them going. So all those stakeholders are out there for us. Most stakeholders are ignorant of each other, right? They don't know each other. They don't really align. They're usually just one-on-one with the project, the whole time. They might glom together and create a consortium, whatever, to be able to advocate better, but they're usually not formed an alliance or formed a group. They're not organized. They usually don't care about who the others are or what their interests are. Yeah, they're after their thing and their thing only. The PM is the only person in the project who knows all the important stakeholders, right? Really, Senator Shelby doesn't give a fart about anybody else. It's Senator Shelby with SLS. He doesn't care. There's other stakeholders around the country and around the world, but Senator Shelby is worried about Senator Shelby, right? He's worried about it being at Marshall Space Flight Center and it being funded, and he doesn't really care about anything else. And so that's the big deal. So the PM has to know all of them. They should identify all the key project stakeholders, and basically what they should is to seek their effort, support, inputs, and commitment to the project, right? Those are the big boys. Like SLS, I think SLS would probably be dead without Senator Shelby, and that's what they've done, is they went and solicited his support, and he's went, thou shalt have a space launch system, and shall be blah, 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 right? And because of who he is in the Senate, he can do this. And so that's the kind of thing you've got to think about when you're the project manager. You never tick off a stakeholder either, right? You make sure they get what they want, when they need it, everything's happy, because one thing Senator Shelby is interested in down here is, so SLS is here, how many jobs does it create, what's it creating in the economy, So if you asked SLS, how many people is on this project in North Alabama, how much does that generate in the local economy, blah, blah, blah. They'll be able to give you those numbers like crazy because that's what Senator Shelby wants to hear, right? And so that's the kind of thing you need to make sure and keep up with when you're doing it. So, a big example is the Big Dig, right? We talked about before, Boston's project, where they wanted to go underneath basically the harbor with the tunnel. And so it's just a crazy thing. And you can look at all the different aspects of it, right? So they had to build all these different things. This is really crappy images, but they had a big tunnel underneath the water, is basically what they were after. And they had all the bridges. It was just a nightmare of a thing to do. So the big stakeholders, who all were they? Congress, the Federal Highway Administration, the EPA, MDT, I don't even know some of these names, but all these big boys. Basically, why were they important? Well, Congress gave funding and had political allies. The Federal Highway gave the funding, right? Then there's regulations, and then the joint venture, basically, of how they created this was profit and prestige. So all of these people had to be kept happy. And it's the project manager's job to make that happen, right? So there are other interest groups, right? Residents, people who, if you declare eminent domain and you rip it around their land, they're gonna be ticked, right? So businesses, because they wanna make sure they're in the right spot to get more of the traffic flow. Labor and trade unions, the concrete, right? You gotta make sure you get the crappy word they, Teamsters. Teamsters on board with you, because they can kill things. Local environmental groups, right? Inevitably you're gonna do something. Like down here on Madison Pike, if you notice, Old Madison Pike is finally closed down, and they're gonna make it 4-lane. For years, they could not get the project started because there was an endangered frog in that creek, right? And an environmental group went no and stopped them from doing it. Somehow, I don't know, did the frog die? I don't know, but something happened and now we get to have this thing. National environmental groups, the Sierra Club, holy crap, don't get them on your bad side. Civic groups, religious congregations, commuters, all these people were very interested in if this thing worked, right? And so you got to, as the project manager, remember all of those people. So you can look at them, just look at how unbelievably, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, the customer, all these people. I mean, it was just nuts to try to get this thing done. Hence why it took so long. It took billions and billions of dollars to make this happen. So the key points, just to wrap up, the project manager must be sensitive to stakeholders' interests and to conflicts they cause, right? And also the project manager's background and experience influences the ability to identify stakeholders, know their interests, and work with them, right? So that's all about stakeholders. That's it for chapter 14 on project roles, authority, and that kind of thing. Again, if you ever have any questions about any of these, feel free to email me because I went through these pretty quick because I don't have anybody sitting here but Matt, and Matt's bored right now, so he's not asking me any questions. So with that, good deal. See y'all later. Bye.